today we're going to be talking about classes in PowerShell. This is more for object-oriented programming. So today we'll be building a few classes. One will be a car, just to show you the basics understandings of what a class is and how to make it work with the actual object, which we'll use a car for an example of that. And we'll give it some properties, and then we'll show you how to initiate the class to make it an actual car object, and we'll make multiple cars from that so you can see that the code is actually reusable. And then we'll show another example of how to do that on a practical use case for, like, example, an API. So let's say you need to integrate with the API. You can make a class for, an API token or a Java web token or whatever you want, and then you can give it custom methods for that token. You can make it to where it will refresh a token, where it could revoke the token, anything like that. And you can extend your classes to other things too. There are parent and child classes. So a parent would be, if you think of a video game, you would have a class for, your person. So people is a class, and then you'll have different types of people. So you could have a wizard, which would have MP, where your warrior wouldn't have MP. So you would have a people class where a person always has a name, an age. Those are the basics. And then a child object would be a child of a person. So they would inherit a name and an age, and then you can give them extra attributes. So if it's a wizard, you can say, okay, they have MP, or they have these special abilities like spells and stuff like that, and that would be part of your child class. We won't get into child classes in this video, but I'll work on other videos where we can drill in to do child classes for different use cases. So without further ado, let's hit the shell. Alright, so the first thing is our syntax for a class object. The first thing you need to do is define it by using the word class. So this is basically stating that this is going to be a class object followed by the name of your class. So this is similar to like a function. So we're going to make a car class. So we'll go ahead and call it a car. And then we're just going to do our open and close brackets. So that right there is literally creating a class. The next thing is assigning properties to that class. So for this class, for a car, we'll give it a make, we'll give it a model, we'll give it a year. So, and usually with classes, what you want to do is you define the types these properties are. So if it's supposed to be a string or an integer, that's the thing about classes is you define all the types so you can control what goes in this object. It's a little bit different than PS custom objects in PowerShell where they can be any kind of items. So let's go ahead and do a string, and we'll make this for our make, and then we'll make another string, and this is going to be for our model, and then our year, we'll make it an integer. So we'll go ahead and make it an int, and we'll call it year. So those are the properties on our car so far. Now the next thing is a constructor. So a constructor is what is used to construct or build the class object itself when you create the object itself. So it's basically, think about, a requirements. So we'll make a constructor that's blank where we don't require any properties, and that will just create an object for a car with the make, model, and year, but we won't require values in that. And that's basically what a constructor does, is you define what has to be done to construct the object. So to do that, the constructor is actually, you make it the same name as the class, and then you use your parentheses, and so that's where you're going to be passing in those properties that are defined. Today, for this one, we're going to make it blank, so we don't need them, and then we're going to add them afterwards. So let's go ahead and open close parentheses, and there we go. We have a car class. So now if I actually highlight this, alright, so now we have a blank constructor. So we'll go ahead and load that in the PowerShell. I was having issues loading this a little bit ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up another PowerShell window. This is how I usually test my code because I find I have issues sometimes within the IDE when I'm trying to load code. So we'll copy this, and we're going to go to the C directory, and we're going to load this in. There we go. So there we have our car class, and then to create the object, you just do a bracket, kind of like calling .NET. We'll call car, a close bracket, and then we'll do : new. And this is going to create a new object for our car. Notice integer, it's going to set that value to 0. That's just how integers work. But you notice all the fields are blank. And that's because we said over here on the left that the constructor, you need 0 values to create this. So we could put this, into a variable, and we can call it car1, and then we can do another one for car2, and now we have car1 and we have car2, and we could set these properties too if we wanted to. So we can go back to car1 and we can make the make, and we can make it equal to, we'll say, a Tesla, and then we'll say for the model we can make it equal to a Model 3. And then for the year, car1.year, we can make that set to a 2020. And now if we look at car1, there we go. And then we look at car2, and that's basically a object with no methods, and the constructor is blank. So now we want it to make it, we don't want people to be able to make a car without any properties. We want to require to have properties. And that's where we can build onto this constructor. So back on the left, what we're going to do is we're going to define the values that get passed in to the class when it's created, which we'll see in a second. So first thing we're going to define is we're going to say we need a string, and this is going to be for our make. We need a string, and this is going to be for our model. And then we're going to say we need an integer, and this is going to be for a year. Now this part gets a little confusing for some people, but remember that when you, on the right here, when we do this new, that means for the current object being created. So when you say that, just think about it as this object, this current object. So you're going to be seeing me use $this here, and this is why I'm saying that. So we're going to say for this current object being built. So we're going to say this current object. We're going to say the make of it is going to equal whatever the make is that we pass in when it gets built. And then again, we'll say this model is going to be whatever is passed through this parameter. And you'll see where these parameters get passed through in a second. So we'll go ahead and do model, and then we'll do this .year, and then $year. Now we're basically saying that these are required parameters when you do the new build. And within these parentheses is where you define those properties. So let's go ahead. I'm going to grab our car, clear our screen over here, and we're going to do this again. So I'm going to go back through the code, and we're going to try to create car1 again with this new, and you're going to see it's going to throw an error because now we require those properties to be populated. And you can see here it says cannot find an overload for new argument count 0 because we're not passing any arguments. So what this would actually look like is this right here. I'm going to grab it from over here. So this is what it would look like. You're going to say car, and you're going to pass, and the order does matter here. Now you can do a hash table, which I can always show later on, where you do key value pairs so it knows what value goes into what field. But if you don't do that, that's when the order does matter. And so here we're passing in for the make, we're saying Tesla, the model is Model 3, and then 2022, and it's the same order as here. And you're probably wondering like how you would know that, and I'll show you a trick to that as well. So here if we hit enter, boom, it created our car, make, model, and year. So now if we wanted to create 30 cars, as long as we have a list of those cars and models, we can make these car objects. And if you pipe this to get member to see the type of object it is, you can see that our type name is actually a car. And what we'll do is we'll add some methods on here in a few to be able to see some methods in action. And a method is basically just calling a function on that object. Kind of like if you were to do get service on a computer. And you have methods where you can do stop service, start service. That's basically what we can do for this car. So far we went over how to create a class, how to define the constructors. And now what we'll do is we're going to make a method. Hopefully I haven't lost you. If I have, make sure to comment in the video below, ask any questions, and I can create more content and more detail around anything you need. So for this one, we're going to do a start. We want to start the car. Now, when you do methods, you got to remember that at the beginning of your method, you got to define what is coming out of the method. If it doesn't return anything, then you can make it void. If you wanted to return a string, you can put a string. If you wanted to return, an integer, you put integer. If it's going to return a PS custom object, you state that at the beginning. So here we're just going to say it's going to return a string. And we're going to call this method start. So we're going to start the car. And actually, we're going to add one more parameter. We're going to make it a Boolean. And we're going to call it is running. So is the car currently running? And we'll make it a default. You can set default parameters here. We'll make it default as false. The car is not running. When you create a car, it shouldn't be running, right? So we'll go ahead and do that. And then down here, what we'll do is we don't need to state that we need to set that as a parameter being passed by default. So we're good there. We'll do start. And then what we'll do is we're going to make this write output. So we're going to say write output. We're going to say starting. We'll do 0 for our first parameter. This is just string format tricks that you can do. It's where you don't have to hard code your variables in here. So you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So we'll say write output. And then what we'll do is we'll say -f. Sorry. We'll do, let me put this in parentheses actually. There we go. So we're going to do write output. We'll do 0, 1, 2. And then we're going to say period. Oh, it should be inside the quotes. And then we'll say -f $this make. So that's going to go in the 0 field. This model. And we'll say this model, and then we'll do this year. So this should work. So typically what you need to do is you need to do a return, not a write output. So we'll do a return, and we'll do this. And we'll see if this works. This syntax works for our output. So we'll go ahead. Oh, forgot we're not using that shell. It's having some issues loading code. So we're going to copy this. We're going to clear over here. We're going to paste. And then what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead. We're going to create our car. So my car. There's our car. It shows that is running as false. Oh, and we forgot to set that in our method, so we'll do that too. So if we pipe this to get member, you can see here we have the start method that we just created. So we can do, and we don't require any parameters. Notice here in our parentheses on the left, we're not requiring any parameters to be passed through here. So we'll just do start. Starting the Tesla Model 3 2020. So now what we'll do though is we'll add on to this because we want to make sure that we change our is running to true, right? So we'll say this for this current object. And then we're going to say the name of the property is running, and we're going to say equals true. And I'm going to remove this $sign because that for some reason added it when I typed it. There we go. So it's going to set is running to true, and then it's going to spray the output to the screen. We'll go ahead and copy, paste all that over here. Enter. And oh, I misspelled true. That's what happens when you type too fast. So clear the screen, we'll paste that in. Alright, we got that going. Gonna go ahead and build our new car. We're gonna check out our car. And notice I reload the code, then I build another car class. If you go back to the previous object, it does not pick up those changes. So you have to reload your code and then create a new object. So notice is running is false. We're going to have start our car. Tesla started. Now if we look at my car, it's running. We're good to go. But what's cool about this is, let's say we had a second car, right? We don't have to do anything special. There we go. So second car, Subaru Outback, my car 2, not running, my car 1, oops, my car actually, still got our Tesla, we got our Outback, we can start our Outback, there we go. So you can see how this can be very powerful, especially if you're doing different objects, right? So there we go. If we wanted to make a stop method, it'd be the same as the start method. We could actually just copy this, paste it here, call it stop. And we'll just put this as stopping. And we'll set this to a false value. And there we go. Go ahead and clear a screen, paste that in. Again, I spelled false. Shame on me. Alright, and then what we'll do is we'll go back. We'll go ahead and create our Subaru, my car 2, not running because we created a new one. Get member. Notice we have start and stop, kind of like a service on a computer, right? Go ahead and we'll say my car 2, start. There we go, starting our Subaru. And you can also drill into the properties too if you wanted to. You could say is running and just pull that value out if you wanted. But what we'll do is we'll show the whole thing. Obviously we can see it's running. Let's go ahead and stop the car. Turn the engine off. There we go. And then if we look again, it's stopped. So that's one use case. If you're building cars, right? This is also good for like forms. If you're creating a form for someone to fill out, you would have a class for that, so you can define what fields are being passed in that form, and you know what data is coming across, and that's really powerful as well. So let's jump over and we'll go over a quick API call client. I won't go into detail on the coding behind it because I don't have an API right now, but I'll show you the structure and then the mindset behind it. So first, we'll go ahead and create a class, starting with class. We're going to call it API client. We're going to make open close brackets. Boom, there's our class. One cool thing you can do is we'll call string, and you can actually set the base URL for your API endpoint. Another cool thing is if you don't want the user to see this property, I will show that as well. Next, you could do a secure string. I would recommend doing like a secure string, or you can do like a PS credential object. Right now, I'm just going to put it as a regular string because, again, it's not going to be a working code for actual API. But here you put your token, and this is where your API token could be. Like I said, you can make it a secure string, and you could have methods in the background that make it into plain text to pass through the API headers. You could have a method that would take this token and build your headers for you. Every time you do an API call, that method would get called to build those headers and then send that through the API. That would be a method you could follow. I'll just set it to string right now. And then basically what you can do is, let's see here. We can do like, again, if you're building headers, you can say, make headers. If you want to do like authenticate, you could do that. So basically what we could do is we'll make it'll be void, so it won't return anything. You can call it like authenticate, and then in here you can pass in 2 strings, we'll say. And again, these could be a credential object in the first place. It really is just how you want to design it. I always encrypt all my stuff, but it's really based on the use case and what you're doing. Obviously for credentials, you would always want to encrypt them. So we'll just do 2 strings here for now, again, just like example. And then in this code block here is where you would basically, build your headers and then get your API token. And then when you do that, you would update from that API call, like from an invoke REST method, you would do this.token equals, what you get back from the API. And then that would update this current object with that new token from there. And again, when you do that API call, right? So it'd be, you say invoke REST method, and then, your headers, and that's going to be, up here you could say your headers are equal to, this isn't accurate for headers, but we'll say username plus your password. Let's say that would build your headers, right? So you build your headers, and then you would pass your headers here, and then for that base URL, when you need to authenticate, you can do $this base URL, and then because your URL is set up here. Now this is something I'm going to show you, basically, that I was talking about earlier, is with this class, right? If we, again, we don't have a constructor right now, so we can create a blank one. So we'll do ApiClient : new, and we created a blank one. Notice you can see base URL, but let's say you wanted to hide that from the user for some reason, if they were doing this for some reason to create the classes instead of, because typically what you would do is you would call these in your function, and the user would never use the classes. But if you did need to use the class as a user, you wanted to hide this, or let's say you have a method that you want to hide from the user, like a delete method. You want them to be able to use methods to get data, but you don't really want them to know there's a delete option. You can hide things with the hidden option. So if we come up here to this property, we can say hidden. And so now we can clear our screen, paste that in, do the same thing, and notice base URL is gone. But if I store this in a variable, and we look again, it's still gone. If we pipe it to get member, it's still gone. You don't see it, but it is there. We can say $API dot base URL, and we'll say equals HTTP : blah blah, actually HTTPS, and we'll just say my site. And now if I do API dot base URL, you can see it's there. If I say API, not there. If I do get member, it's also not there. But as a Jedi, if you use the Force, it is there, and you can see it. So that's basically what you have to do. So hopefully you learned something from classes, and we'll go into a deeper dive later on with more detailed classes. We'll do child classes. We can actually, I'll find an API. If you have something in the comments, like some kind of open API, we can program against that and make an API token and go through that process as well. So just remember, like and subscribe, make sure to comment, and I'll see you on the next one.